что ответ России будет незамедлительным и приведет вас к таким последствиям, с которыми вы в своей истории еще никогда не сталкивались.
They are intimidating us with the usage of nuclear weapons.
Russia could launch a nuclear attack within months.
Russia has the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world.
Это всего лишь один пуск, Борис, а Англии нет.
Putin could use a tactical nuclear weapon.
Russia is already in a position to destroy the world several times over.
Today, humanity is just one misunderstanding, one miscalculation away from nuclear annihilation.
Superpowers in a battle for supremacy in Ukraine.
Опасность серьезная, она реальна, ее нельзя недооценивать.
Fundamental role of U.S. nuclear weapons is to deter nuclear attacks on the United States, on our allies and partners.
They are bragging that they can destroy with nuclear weapons not only a certain country but the entire planet.
With nuclear-armed nations locking horns, could the course of war force Russia to resort to its deadly nuclear weapons? And in Putin's nuclear arsenal is the biggest weapon ever made, the world's largest ever nuclear device, the Tsar Bomba, or the Emperor of Bombs. October 30th, 1961, the peak of the Cold War, and Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev sent an unmistakable warning to the West. A Soviet Tu-95V bomber took off from the Olenia airfield in the Kola Peninsula, in the far north of Russia. The plane, painted bright white to lessen the impact of the mega bomb's flash, arrived at its target point, Novaya Zemlya, a sparsely populated area in the Barents Sea. The pilot brought his Bear bomber to Mitushika Bay, a Soviet testing range at a height of 34,000 feet. Following him was another modified Tu-16 to film the blast that would make history. The massive bomb was attached to a parachute meant to delay its fall and the detonation, an attempt to give the pilot enough time to fly out of range. Even so, the chances of survival for this Soviet crew were grim. The odds were only 50% that they would live. They reached their destination, opened the locks, and dropped their deadly cargo. At 11:32 a.m. Moscow time, the bomb exploded. It created a fireball 8 kilometers wide. The explosion produced about 57,000 kilotons of energy. It was so intense that the flash could be seen from 1,000 kilometers away. Severny, an uninhabited village 55 kilometers from ground zero, was leveled. All buildings within this radius were completely destroyed. Windows within hundreds of kilometers were broken. The bomb was detonated 4 kilometers above the ground to minimize radioactive fallout, but even then, the ground below the explosion was incinerated by the intense heat. The rocks turned to ash. The plumes kept rising until they reached nearly 65 kilometers high. The shock wave generated after the explosion was so big that it traveled 3 times around the Earth. On the ground, the heat from the explosion was so much that even 100 kilometers away from the blast site, it would have caused third-degree burns. And although the warhead was detonated miles above the ground, it generated a strong seismic wave with a magnitude of over 5. A Soviet cameraman described the explosion like this.
The clouds beneath the aircraft and in the distance were lit up by the powerful flash. The sea of light spread under the hatch, and even clouds began to glow and became transparent. At that moment, our aircraft emerged from between 2 cloud layers, and down below in the gap, a huge bright orange ball was emerging. The ball was powerful and arrogant like Jupiter. Slowly and silently, it crept upwards. Having broken through the thick layer of clouds, it kept growing. It seemed to suck the whole earth into it. The spectacle was fantastic, unreal, supernatural.
Имеющего ряд новых конструктивных особенностей.
The bomb was 8 meters long, had a diameter of nearly 2.6 meters and weighed more than 27 tons, the weight of 5 elephants. It was so big, it couldn't even fit in the internal bay of the huge plane that flew it to the test site. And the scale of its power was staggering.
First in a test in the United States, New Mexico.
It was 2,000 times more powerful than the American bomb dropped on Nagasaki. 10 times the total firepower used in the entire Second World War. Little Boy was 15 kilotons of TNT. The Tsar Bomba was equivalent to 58 megatons of TNT. As immense as it was, the Tsar Bomba was still only half as powerful as its original plan. The first blueprint was for a bomb with a 100 megaton yield, but Soviet scientists feared the radiation could blanket the entire northern part of the Soviet Union. Eventually, the original 3 layers of uranium were replaced with 3 layers of lead to cut its impact in half. That call was taken by one of the 3 people who played critical roles in the journey of the Tsar Bomba, Andrei Sakharov. This Soviet nuclear scientist developed the bomb along with his team, but he later became a disarmament crusader, faced with the extent of devastation that nuclear bombs he had helped to create could cause. Sakharov was later awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. But in 1961, Sakharov was following the orders of Nikita Khrushchev, the man who was leading the Soviet Union, and wanted his country to have the world's biggest bomb. The third man who made the Tsar Bomba possible was Andrei Durnovtsev, the pilot who dropped the bomb. Durnovtsev managed to fly his plane almost 45 kilometers away before the bomb that he had dropped exploded. But the blast still knocked him off course, with his bare bomber dropping nearly a kilometer towards the ground. Luckily, the pilot managed to regain control, and against all odds, the plane landed safely. Durnovtsev was later promoted to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel and named a hero of the Soviet Union. The Tsar Bomba had one clear purpose: to make the West tremble as they watched the might of Soviet technology. Before the Cold War started in 1947, the race to acquire the world's most destructive weapon had already begun. The US had already conducted the world's first nuclear test in 1945, and in August the same year, it ended the Second World War by dropping 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was this display of American power that prompted Joseph Stalin to order the development of Soviet nuclear weapons within 5 years. In August 1949, the Soviet Union conducted its first nuclear test, codenamed RDS-1, at the Semipalatinsk test site in modern-day Kazakhstan. Meanwhile, the United States tested the world's first hydrogen bomb, called Mike, in 1952, and its biggest nuclear device called Castle Bravo in 1954. A frosty Cold War had given way to a nuclear arms race. Soviet scientists were also working on developing a hydrogen bomb and managed to test their first in 1955. But Nikita Khrushchev went a step further and ordered the creation of the most powerful bomb ever made. Although its code name was supposed to be Ivan or Vanya, most of the Soviet scientists who developed the world's biggest bomb, including Andrei Sakharov, called it just that, the Big Bomb. Khrushchev called it Kuzka's mother, a Russian phrase that means a lesson you will never forget. The Americans, who Khrushchev was clearly targeting, simply called it Joe 111, but its most evocative name is the one that stuck, the Tsar Bomba, or the King of Bombs. The Tsar Bomba was a hydrogen aerial bomb, something that's also known as a thermonuclear weapon, a more advanced and powerful version of an atomic bomb. While atomic bombs use either uranium or plutonium in most cases, hydrogen bombs also need additional isotopes of hydrogen called deuterium and tritium. As a result, the reaction that causes the explosion is also different. Atomic bombs rely on fission, a process where the core of uranium or plutonium is compressed, which then splits into parts before releasing a huge amount of energy. Hydrogen bombs, on the other hand, not only use the energy from fission, but also from secondary fusion, making the explosion much stronger. In fact, Andrei Sakharov, its maker, used the Sloika method by alternating layers of deuterium, an isotope of hydrogen, and uranium. Testing the world's largest and most dangerous weapon was just the beginning. Just months after the detonation of the Tsar Bomba, Khrushchev ordered the detonation of another megaton bomb. In fact, Soviet scientists detonated a total of 79 nuclear bombs in the following year. America too was keeping up the pace. Its nuclear tests in the Marshall Islands, for example, is something that the US is still paying reparations for. Between 1946 and 1958, the US cloaked the Marshall Islands in radiation worth 7,000 Hiroshima bombs.
7 miles into the sky, the orange firing cloud billows and surges.
The world had to draw the line somewhere, and it did in 1963, when the two superpowers agreed to ban all above-ground nuclear tests, 2 years after the Tsar Bomba explosion. In 1963, the United States, the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union signed the Partial Nuclear Test Ban Treaty, which prohibited nuclear tests in the atmosphere, in outer space and underwater. Over the years, the USSR and the US continued to test a large number of nuclear bombs. Between 1949 and 1990, the Soviet Union conducted 750 nuclear tests and the US 969. While the Soviet Union carried out these tests within its own borders, the US used several foreign test sites. After years of experiments, testing and explosions, the Soviet Union conducted its last nuclear test in 1990. For the US, it was 1992. The number of nuclear weapons in the world has significantly declined since the Cold War. Warheads have been reduced from approximately 70,300 in 1986 to an estimated 12,700 in early 2022. However, the world's combined inventory of nuclear warheads remains very high. 9 countries possess roughly 12,700 warheads as of 2022. Approximately 90% of all nuclear warheads are owned by Russia and the United States. Each own more than 5,000. The overall inventory of nuclear weapons in the world is declining, but the pace of reduction has slowed over the last 30 years. Of the world's 12,700 nuclear warheads, more than 9,400 are in military stockpiles for use by missiles, aircraft, ships and submarines. Russia released classified footage of the world's largest nuclear explosion only in 2020 to mark the 75th anniversary of Russia's atomic industry. And it is perhaps most effective as a signal, nothing more, of Russia's power. Its very size and scale make it difficult to use. Any plane that would have had to carry the Tsar Bomba would not be able to carry enough fuel to reach its target. However, the possibility of Russia placing similar warheads on powerful intercontinental ballistic missiles does exist. And this would bring cities on the other side of the globe into Moscow's crosshairs. 30 years after the end of the Cold War, the United States and Russia are yet again standing face to face over Ukraine. Both are nuclear armed. And where nuclear weapons exist, there exists the possibility of a nuclear war. And in Putin's arsenal is the world's biggest nuclear bomb.
Экипаж самолета-носителя отлично